Another school shooting. Another radical terrorist next door. Another senseless violent crime in the Denver area. Stories like this make me wonder, what is happening to our safe, pleasant suburban communities? Now, I'm sure the constant and sensational news cycle is exaggerating these trends. But the most recent shooting at the Deer Creek Middle School was just too close for comfort for me. Fellow Toastmasters, welcome guests. I was inspired to write and give this speech just 3 days ago, after I read a humble letter to the editor in our own Columbine Courier. The title of this letter, "We Must Rebuild Community." We must rebuild community. And it was written by a concerned parent who was as disturbed as I was about the recent shooting and violence that has become all too commonplace in our Jefferson County. Now, in this letter, Steve Harvey makes a critical point that struck me so strongly that I was called to action to write and give this speech. Steve stated this, quote unquote, "Several factors contribute to our culture of violence. But let's talk about the most important one, and the one that many Coloradans may be willing to confront: the dissolution of our sense of community. The loss of connectedness within our community has been on my mind for a number of years. And it's been a topic of many Toastmasters speeches that I've given in the past 10 years. In fact, just 5 years ago, while in San Diego, I gave a speech at an area contest. And it was centered around a great book, Bowling Alone, by Robert Putnam. Bowling Alone, The Collapse and Revival of American Community. So I gave a speech on this, and I discussed the deterioration of social bonds within our community, the sense of belonging in our U.S. society. And I highlighted the author's conclusions about the dramatic changes in American behavior, which reveal how we've become increasingly disconnected from one another, and how social structures, whether they be the PTA, clubs like this, churches, or even bowling leagues, these groups have disintegrated compared to how they were 20, 30, 40 years ago. So tonight, I want to talk less about why this has happened, like I did in that speech, and I want to talk about what we can do to reverse this trend. But first, let me give you a little bit more background about Putnam's ideas, the gentleman that wrote the book Bowling Alone. The central theme in this book is the importance of social capital. Social capital, what is that? It's defined as connections between individuals and the social network and norms of reciprocity, trustworthiness, things that arise from bonding. Social capital can be characterized as community monitoring, socializing, mentoring, and organizing. Social capital differentiates a safe, friendly environment and city from unsafe, crime-ridden ones. And typically, the higher the social capital, the lower the crime rate. Another important distinction that needs to be made between social capital is the difference between bridging and bonding. And these are two very important things. Bridging social capital is very inclusive, open, and tolerant. Toastmasters International is an example of bridging social capital. Whereas bonding is more homogeneous. It's where birds of a feather flock together. And it's not a bad thing, but it's definitely more inward focused, more exclusive identities. And examples of bonding social capital include fraternal organizations, a church-based women's reading club, high-end country clubs. Those are bonding. Bridging, again, Toastmasters International is bridging the civil rights movement, youth service groups, and nonpartisan community organizations. Think of bonding like superglue and bridging as WD-40. WD-40 lubricates the society, gets people talking that might not be the same. Now, both can encourage reciprocity and civic engagement, but bridging is certainly more open and outwardly focused. The erosion of social capital and community engagement has affected wealthy neighborhoods as well as poverty-stricken ones. And I'd like to quote from the book, and this struck me as it relates to Littleton and our shootings. The shooting sprees in suburban and rural neighborhoods are a reminder that the breakdown of the community continues as it continues in more privileged settings. Affluence and education are insufficient to prevent collective tragedy. That struck me. Wow. Education is not enough to prevent collective tragedy. And that's what we've been witnessing. So what can be done? Let's look on the bright side. Enough of the gloom and doom. What can be done to bridge and connect to our neighbors, reduce our crime rates? According to Putnam, this building of bridging social capital requires that we transcend our social, professional, and political identities and connect with people unlike ourselves. Littleton resident Steve Harvey, who wrote the letter, supports Putnam's ideas and states that it's time to come together and get to know all the children and all the adults in our neighborhood. He calls for all of us to be role models and mentors whenever possible, and for us to all form a net of adult guidance for the children. I like these ideas, and they really, really struck me, and that's why I'm here tonight. Now, Mr. Harvey is a candidate for State House District 28, and he also announced a local initiative that I feel very strongly about and will actively support. He has been called to action to help South Jefferson County by working with community leaders and existing organizations like the PTA, HOAs, and churches, regardless of your ideological orientation, regardless of your political party. He wants to help build bridges and attract as many neighbors together as possible into a network of what he calls reasonable people of goodwill to work together, make our communities safer. So part of this call to action is the creation of Southern Jeffco Community Organization, which now has a dedicated website, Facebook group, and wiki site. The group's mission is to create stronger communities with more interaction among neighbors, more shared mentoring and guidance for children, and mutual support and civil discourse amongst adults. I think we need a bit more of that. So I encourage you to check out the website. I have flyers for you to take with the information. And get involved and either get involved or share the message with others. I plan to be a leader and an active participant in this movement. This increased face-to-face interaction, civic engagement, will help us rebuild our increasingly disconnected society. Mutual respect and active verbal communication. Imagine that, actually like seeing someone and talking to them rather than just being on the internet. Verbal communication can bridge the gap that the anonymous, often antagonistic and polarized cyberspace communications open. More personal forms of this bonding will increase social capital and trust in our communities and hopefully prevent the next violent and tragic event in our neighborhoods. And so I say, no more school shootings, no more radical terrorists living next door, no more increases in local violent crime. Whatever you do, please do something. Take action and or share the message. Let's get together, reach out, get to know your neighbor on a more personal level. Create a stronger sense of community and become connected. Help our children through tutoring and mentoring. And join the South Jeffco Community Organization and make a difference to increase social capital in your neighborhood.